Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Audio Advice live stream and giveaway, where today it's kind of an extra special live stream. Normally, we have one single product and one brand that we're kind of talking about that product or that brand the entire time. We want to do something a little extra special since this was Record Store Day coming up, which is one of my all-time favorite days of the year. So we brought on some absolute experts in the industry around vinyl playback. So that includes turntables, cartridges, and the album pressing side of all of this. So we've got some real experts. So as you guys may or may not know, this is a Q&A driven platform. So we want you all to ask questions and get engaged. So we actually have a prize for the best question on top of our grand prize giveaway. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get everybody introduced here. And we do have a fun question. So what I want you guys to do is introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do. And then I also want you to tell us what your very first album was. So Lewis, you're to my right. Do you want to go ahead and kick it off?
Sure. My name is Louis Dorio. I am the product specialist for Ortophone here in New York. I've been with Ortophone for 20 years, and I know enough about cartridges. I know a lot about cartridges. That's what I do every single day. So, yeah.
Awesome. And what was your first album?
My first album was Thriller. It was a picture disc, and I was just talking to Rob from MoFi earlier, and he said that if I had it in good condition, that it would be worth a lot of money. Unfortunately, I had this thing when I was probably 5 years old, and it's just destroyed. I didn't know how to take care of a record yet.
Whose first album's in good shape? Awesome. Well, Bill, you gonna go next?
Hi, guys. Yeah, it's Bill Voss. I'm with Techniques, and very happy to be with you folks today. And I'm the business development manager here, and just happy to have our turntable featured in the event. And it was very difficult for me to remember the very first album that I picked out, that I bought myself, I guess. I've had, it started, at such a young age, but the best that I could come up with is this record. When it was first out in '71 was probably the one that I remember buying the most, because I had, just a different experience when I bought it. So it was just that's the only one I could really remember for certain of an experience of actually purchasing it. But it might have been Jimi Hendrix smash hits. Hard to say. I always liked rock and roll. So
awesome. Well, thanks for attending. Rob, you next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Rob Loverdi. I'm coming at you live from Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab, where I'm a mastering engineer since 2007. I worked on transferring and LP cutting on occasion, and my primary stock in trade is SACD mastering. I do that more regularly than anything, and it is just such an honor on a daily basis to work on albums that I love and that we all love at a world-class mastering facility, the best in the world. So every day is Pinch Me Day here at MoFi.
That's awesome. So tell us what your first album was.
First album, God. I want to say it was probably the Rolling Stones' More Hot Rocks, Big Hits and Phased Cookies, if you remember that double LP compilation from 1972.
Great cover art. Great.
Oh,
cover.
right. I think, and that's probably what attracted me to it.
Yeah.
Mom, I want this.
Yep.
Maybe my favorite cover ever.
Right.
That's how it goes. Well, so for those of you who don't know me, my name's Nick. I typically work in home theater day to day, but I got my start in this industry, kind of dipped my toes into it with records. So I worked at a record store in college and have been collecting albums since I was like 13 or 14 years old. So I've been, huge into this. Record Store Day, like I said, near to dear to me. I think it's great for a lot of people to kind of get into the industry by working in record stores. I think they're a lifeblood of the community. So support your local record store if you take nothing else away from today. But so for my first album, I was embarrassed about it for a long time because I wanted a really cool album. But the truth is I was like 13 years old walking through an FYE, which I don't even know if they're still around anymore. But I was walking through there and I was like, I've seen this album around and I wanted a big album cover of it. So I didn't have a turntable yet. So I got MGMT. You can see my loving mother set on top of the washing machine for whatever reason, and it got detergent on it and ruined the album cover all through here. So it gives it character, but that just started that spark started a fire. So ever since then, I've been collecting albums. So it's been great, but awesome. Well, without further ado, let's kind of get into the giveaway portion of this. So we're going to announce the giveaway winner at the end, but Bill, do you want to start off by telling us a bit about what we're giving away today?
Absolutely. I think you had a graphic at the beginning, but it's the infamous design from Techniques. Not in, I used the wrong word there. Not infamous, famous design from Techniques, where this is designed after the iconic SL1200 Mark II turntable, but it's in our new series, and it's a special edition that is a collaboration with Techniques and the Lamborghini Automobili, and there are 3 different colors in the series. I think you're giving away the orange version. It looks spectacular. It has the iconic design that Lamborghini uses on their wheels. You can see that in the additional accoutrements that are added to the styling. And there's a little carbon fiber type of plate on the front commemorating it, and a special slip mat. There is a very special record that's included with this turntable. The only way to get this record is when you buy one of these turntables. So one of the special things about whoever gets this today will be that very special record that comes with it, that has the sounds and recordings of all the different Lamborghini automobiles, which is really an exciting thing to listen to. I mean, you fire that album up on a real good system and it's like the car is right there in the room. It's just an incredible recording, and you'll have all the benefits of a typical Techniques 1200 series turntable, but in the latest version, which has all kinds of adjustments for pitch fader, target lights, stroboscope. It actually is very customizable. It actually goes backwards, plays in reverse or forward. Very easy to accommodate a lot of different cartridges, and I think that is showing the Ortofon Concord type cartridge. It's a great package. So happy to talk more if anyone has any questions about it. But that's your giveaway today. It's amazing.
Awesome. And Lewis, I think we got another piece that we threw on last minute. We didn't get it until this week, but tell us about what you're putting on that table.
Oh, well, we're giving away a Concord Music Bronze, and the Concord Music series is it's a moving magnet cartridge series. The idea of the Concord Music is that it doesn't require any setup or alignment beyond setting, say, tracking force and anti-skating, because it's a one-piece design, integrated head shell, and it's designed specifically to complement Techniques tone arm geometry, so that it's perfect. You just connect it to the tone arm, and you're set to play records.
Awesome. Yeah, well, this is a really great setup. I'm super excited about this. I personally advocated to have a 1200 on here because I think it's one of the most iconic tables, that I think that are around in the community. I mean, it's been around since the 70s, early 70s. It's been a staple.
1972 to be precise. The Mark II that everyone is familiar with, that styling, came out in 1979.
Very cool. Yeah, so this is an iconic table. But as I said, we do have a question or a prize for best question. So make sure you get your questions in, because we do have a prize for that. And Rob, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're giving away for that?
Sure, I'd love to. We're going to be giving away a Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab one-step pressing of Van Halen's 1980 release, Women and Children First. And really excited about that. Some lucky questioner who will receive that.
Awesome. Well, tell us a bit about what One Step is. These albums, well, what their value is, kind of what makes them higher value, why they're kind of special.
Absolutely. Well, it all starts with the mastering process. Actually, what it really starts with is the acquisition of the master tape. And that's something that we've been able to do with all of the Van Halen releases. Once you have that, it's then up to the engineer to do the best possible transfer of that tape and then cut the best possible record. Where the one-step process comes in is that it's a special way of plating and pressing records that removes one of the steps that serves to degrade the record pressing process. So what we have is a lacquer that is then plated and becomes the stamper from which all the records are made. And so we end up having to cut many lacquers because each lacquer is going to create a stamper. And that's where the records are cut. So you're cutting out the father, because usually the pressing or the plating process is you have a lacquer and then a father, a mother, a stamper, and then the pressing In this case, you have a lacquer, a stamper, and a pressing. So there's less electroplating that has to be done, fewer steps to the process. And that's always preferable in just about anything to do with audio. Less is typically more.
Awesome. Yeah. These MoFi albums are absolutely the best albums. So I've had a lot of albums and I played a lot of them, and I told them the story the other day that I thought that the first time I saw a MoFi record, I was like, why does this have a banner on it? Is this a bootleg? And then I played it and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So highly suggest them if you haven't heard them yet. But awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get this kicked off with some questions. And we got a Zeppelin MoFi? Was that what that was?
Yeah, it's my old Led Zeppelin 2, and I got Aqualung and King Crimson, and
awesome.
A huge pile of MoFis over the years.
Awesome. So let's see. Let's kick this off with, all right, I want a fun one. I want to start this off controversial already. And this one's going to go straight to Rob, because I know Rob kind of dabbles in both of these things. So, okay, tell us again why a record is better than a CD.
Why is a record better than a CD? I don't know if I would say that. I don't think there's a blanket statement that can be made. I think that a well-made record is a well-made record, and a well-made CD is a well-made CD. If you, they're different sound carriers, and I don't think a preference, and also it comes down to, what are you playing on? What are you playing these things on? Do you have a $10,000 analog rig and a $100 Discman, to play your CD? So I wouldn't necessarily say that one format is superior. I think it all comes down to the way it was engineered, the way it was produced.
Yep, I completely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else want to touch on that? All right, we'll leave it there if you guys want. So let's see. So this one, we'll go over to Lewis for this one. So do you have to have a special cartridge to play a record backwards without harming it? Because this one did have a reverse function, so it's a special use case.
Well, the bottom line is that with cartridges, that different stylus shapes are going to be in use, and different stylus shapes have different benefits to them. Generally, as you kind of move up the food chain, the better, more complex stylus shapes tend to reach deeper into the groove and get more music out. But some of the problem with these higher end stylus shapes is that they tend to exhibit a degree of directionality, where they like to move forward a lot more than they like to move backwards. So if we're talking about the most basic type of stylus shape, which is the spherical or conical stylus, that this one, you can imagine it's called spherical because it's it's all the way around. It's basically it's symmetrical all the way around. And so the conical or spherical shape, as you can see in the diagram over here, that this one doesn't have a whole lot of contouring to it. And so therefore it can play backwards very easily. When you take a look at other stylus shapes, when you move up to an elliptical, that it has a minimum of contouring, it can still generally play backwards. And even something like a line contact, which on this diagram is called linear contact. That these can generally play backwards as well, but there are also sometimes considerations to exactly the suspension of the cartridge and how rugged that the cantilever is, the metal part where the diamond is actually mounted. Sometimes that these can become overwhelmed from back cueing or turning the record backwards. This is precisely why Ortophone also makes a line of DJ cartridges, which for a long time have been considered industry standard and find their way on Technics turntables as are used by DJs. But that should pretty much clear up that question. Overall, when you talk about turning a record backwards, that we don't generally recommend it when it comes to hi-fi cartridges, just because there's something at stake with the stylus, that they tend to get pretty expensive. You don't want to put wear or stress on them. If you really want to play a record backwards or do something like that frequently, then it should be done with the DJ type cartridge. You'd be much safer that way.
Yeah, it's not super common to see reverse on all of them. Oh, Rob's down. You're good.
Sorry about that.
So we do see it on some of the Techniques tables. So maybe Bill, tell us a little bit about why you guys do reverse on tables.
Yeah, the only turntable that we do that with is a Mark 7 turntable. So keep that in mind. The 1200s, the GR, the GR2, the 1300G, the 1200G. I know the models will drive you crazy, but they do not have reverse play. Only that 1200 Mark 7 does. And that was actually something that was added to that turntable when it first came out after discussing the needs of, what pro DJs were asking for. They wanted to have that reverse play. And what you can do with that turntable is underneath the platter, you actually don't have to take the platter off. You can just run a little screwdriver through there. And there's, I think it's 7 different dip switches, which can customize the turntable. You can actually change the strobe light color. You can change it from red to blue. You can change the you can turn off 78 RPM and switch on reverse. You can change the torque. You can change the braking. And there's a couple other things going on in there that you have adjustment for. It's fully customizable, which are a bit different than our other turntables, but it's very specific for pro DJ use. But what's great about that turntable is it has all the features that an audiophile would want, particularly with VTA adjustment, which is very easy to adjust the VTA for different heights of vinyl, different cartridge accommodations. And it also, being a coreless direct drive motor, is one of the most advanced type of direct drive motors that you can get in a turntable. And that's starting with our basic model. That's the Mark 7 is just the same turntable you're giving away, but it doesn't have the Lamborghini nomenclature and the record that comes with it. So we make that in silver or black, and through the entire line of turntables we've kept that style, that iconic 1200 Mark II style, to pay homage to that whole series. I mean, it was the most popular series of turntables I think ever sold. Rumor has it that there were, more than 3.5 million turntables sold in the 1200 series. When you take the original 1200, the Mark II, the Mark III, Mark IV, all the way up to the Mark 7, and they were just, each one had its own special pedigree that had adapted itself at the time, and there's still some of the original Mark IIs are still in, functioning today very, very healthily, and they'll keep running. That's 40 years ago more. So, it's just our turntables are built to last. The new models are built even, with more technology in them, and very high quality materials. And I think you'll get another 40 years out of some of these. All the new models are just amazing. So.
For sure. Well, awesome. Yeah, we normally don't talk about the kind of DJ side on our channel, because we're more the the audiophile and DJ. For some reason, people think there's a separation, but there's a lot that connects us. We got more in common than you think. But we had some comments of people saying, "Oh, why aren't you giving away 2 turntables?" No, didn't want to throw in the microphone as well, but so anyway, we wanted to talk about that. It is Record Store Day after all, so we're coming up on Record Store Day, so we need to to show some love to the entire community. But Rob, I got a fun one for you here. So does the last stamped record in a press run have any quality loss when compared to the first one stamped?
It could. It depends on how far along in the run you've gone. I would say that if you have a stamper and you're pressing the 50,000th record from that stamper, I'm no expert on pressing myself, but from my understanding is that the fewer pressings that you take off of a stamper, the better it's going to be. That stampers do wear out over time. Not sure exactly where the number is. I think the sweet spot is to maybe use a stamper for about maybe 5,000 pressings. And maybe in that kind of press run, you're looking at 0 degradation. The hope is that the pressing engineer is not allowing a stamper to age or wear that far into the process to where there is a noticeable marked amount of degradation. And now that we have Fidelity record pressings in Oxnard, California, we can be sure of that. We can be sure that that's not happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, there's certain pressings are way more desirable than others. Yeah, there's there's so many exceptions to every one of those rules. So yeah,
Right.
sometimes a certain country's pressing is held in higher regard. Sometimes certain batch of records is held in high regard. There's no probably flat way to say, hey, this one's way better than the other one. Yeah,
It's I like to say, ask 4 engineers, you'll get 5 answers.
Yeah, there you go.
You know?
I like it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we got another one here. So question for Technics / Ortofon. When developing a cartridge for a specific tone arm or platform, what considerations are needed?
Okay, that's a really lengthy answer to a question. But I would the thing that I can sort of touch upon briefly is that there's always going to be a relationship between the effective mass of the tone arm versus the actual weight of the cartridge, as well as the compliance of the stylus. The compliance is how flexible the suspension is. The stylus has a rubber damper that allows the cantilever to move in every direction. And compliance is a rating that basically specifies how flexible that this is. Obviously, if you have something that is a very high mass tone arm, you don't see a lot of high mass tone arms this day and age, but a high mass tone arm would require a cartridge that has a very stiff suspension. And conversely, something that has a very a low mass tone arm, something that's very lightweight, would require a cartridge have a very high compliance, a very compliant and flexible suspension. So this is kind of a big thing when it comes to cartridge development, because Ortofon is always going to try to make cartridges that are compatible with moderate mass tone arms. That's the vast majority of what's available in the industry today. We want anybody to be able to purchase virtually any of our cartridges and be able to implement them on almost any turntable that's out there. There are some outliers. There are a few, but generally they're statistically insignificant. And we kind of have a cartridge almost for everybody. The only thing that we no longer make is P-mount cartridges, and that's something that Bill would know something about, because that was a Technics thing a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a great explanation, and I think that one of the things that Technics does consider, if you know our product line, the SL1500 turntable. I noticed some of the comments come in as, why does Technics have any non-DJ looking turntables? And the SL1500 would be a great example of that, and also the SL1300 and the SL1000. But can talk about that a little later. But to stay focused on this, I would say that our engineers have discovered the Ortofon 2M Red was a great cartridge. We wanted to provide a complete package with the SL1500, and all their research turned up that 2M Red was a great combination, and we include that with the 1500. We generally don't include cartridges with the turntables other than that model, but we have had special editions, and there's a basic model called the SL100C, which comes with an Audio-Technica cartridge, and there's a top-of-the-line model, which was a limited edition that came with a Nagaoka cartridge, but not in this country. It was only offered we didn't offer it in the US. So we have had partnerships based on how different cartridges perform in different models of our turntable. So the engineers do take a lot of time with that, but I think that there's too many cartridges out there to really make, too perfect a decision. And I encourage people to try as many cartridges as I can, try different cartridges within a line. Like Ortofon has such a wide range, and they have the P-mount, they have the, the plug and play, the Concord type cartridges. And, it helps you understand just how great your turntable can sound, and going back in the day, the question was, how do you determine the right cartridge for a right turntable? And Lewis mentioned P-mount at one time, and there was another question I think came in the chat, the difference between S tone arms, straight tone arms, and things like that. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat when you're trying to get a record to play perfectly and track a groove all the way across the record. And the P-mount cartridge was a way to make it universally adjust, without any adjustments. Ortofon has done much of that with the Concord, but this P-mount, once you plug the cartridge in, again, it was all set up and taken care of for you. So a lot of brands used a P-mount type tone arm in the day, but there were less choices. And today, I don't know if you could buy a new P-mount cartridge, to tell you the truth. So it's it's just horses for courses and which cartridges will work best. I think Lewis' explanation was the best one. So, but it is all taken into consideration, and your dealer can help you. AudioVice, exactly what they are, can give you is great audio advice, and they can tell you exactly, how to set up your cartridge. They can set it up for you and help you with all that. So we rely on our dealers' expertise quite a bit to help with that.
Yeah, and I appreciate the plug. Yeah, we do have a whole team of
show.
absolute experts with these. So kind of a question following up on that. Is it better? So if you have a removable stylus option on your turntable, is it better to have the head shell integrated into that, or put your own head shell on there?
One of the things I was going to mention also in as we listen to all the different cartridges, I could show you my cartridge bin over there. I probably got 30 of them in there, but having Technics turntables all have interchangeable head shells. And this is what makes easy for companies like Ortofon to make a Concord and have the calibration set up mostly all set for you at the factory, just plug and play essentially, because it's all built into the coordinates and design and measurements of the head shell. And I think, Lewis, where does that mount up to as far as geometry with the Concords? Is that a bare-walled, would you say?
Actually, the geometry that we utilize for Concord cartridges is the Technics alignment curve,
okay.
which is not really bare-walled. It's somewhat closer to Stevenson.
Yeah,
but it's a modified Stevenson basically.
So even easier, when you come down to it. So it calibrates the same way that if you put the Technics adjuster
overhang gauge,
you can. So that's another thing to consider is by having interchangeable head shells, you can switch from a stereo cartridge to a mono cartridge. For older record collections, if you have 78s, you can switch to 78s easily. And what's good about if you use the same type of cartridge, you can actually change within as little as 5 to 10 seconds, as opposed to spending a whole afternoon taking the cartridge off of and having to reinstall a new cartridge on a tone arm that doesn't have interchangeable head shells. So there's a lot of flexibility with the Technics concepts, and we're not the only ones using an S-type head shell, but it's very popular, and that's why people like that capability. So all our turntables have that.
Yeah. So that kind of leads on to this question, which I wanted to get in here. So why does 78s need a special stylus, and what's different about it?
Well, this is one of my favorite questions because, I always say to people when we talk about mono records and 78s, that if you thought that regular stereo records was a complicated topic, that it gets to be infinitely more complicated when we talk about monos and 78s. With 78s, the groove sizes are much, much larger. And so it's requiring a stylus shape size, which is roughly more than three times the size of a standard stereo stylus. Otherwise, it won't occupy the groove completely. It'll kind of be bouncing back and forth inside of the groove. Obviously, that would sound terrible. It might even do a number on your stylus. But the thing that gets even more complicated is that if you really want to get into the weeds about 78s, that different record companies that were releasing 78s when they were new, that nobody had a uniform groove size. And so sometimes they're, for instance, Ortofon, our 78 stylus is 65 micrometer diameter. Now, this pretty much covers just about everything, and it's roughly compatible with everything. But, the stylus sizes that were suggested for 78s when they were new, that you would have some that went up to 72 micrometers, some that went as low as 60, and everywhere in between. And if you do a little bit of digging, you can find references to record labels and what they were using and were suggesting. I don't necessarily think that everybody has to worry about that, because a 65 micrometer kind of hits it square in the middle. You'll have good compatibility that way. But if somebody is absolutely a maniac about 78 RPM records, that apparently there are still sources where you can get custom stylus sizes to fit every single shellac record like a glove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Yeah, I've never really, I haven't spent a lot of time with 78s because I hate swapping out my cartridge, and I don't do a typically removable head shell. Yeah, what's the fidelity like generally on a 78? And this can be anybody can answer this.
I mean, I think you get a frequency response up to what, like 5 kilohertz. Would you say that that's about right, Rob?
Well, I haven't cut a 78, but my understanding is that it is definitely limited bandwidth relative to the standard 45 RPM or 33 and a third mono or stereo record. And I wonder if that does have a lot to do with the stylus to record contact and the technology afforded to 78s. How far really did it get, before we got into the slower speeds?
Something interesting. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Something interesting with 78s are that you have to be ready for a different experience when you play a 78. I mean, it's not going to be anything like most records. But if you can find these in great shape, what's preserved on these records can be just so intimate and so revealing because they are such fine focus. There's very little bass, there's very little high frequency. So what does come out is some for vocals, it's spectacular for hearing what that individual may have sounded like. And another point with 78s are that there are actually modern day 78s that are considered, audiophile 78 RPM. And there's a company in Japan selling these. You don't see it too often, as we all complain about having to flip the sides on 245 RPMs. We split up the records to put one two-sided record on 4 sides so we can get 45 RPM and benefit from the faster speed. They've done that with 78 audiophile vinyl. And what happens is you get only 2 songs. You get a song on each side if you're lucky. But the sound can be incredible. And for these audiophile, that's a micro groove. You don't need a special stylus for it. So we have a record that we use at Techniques which was actually recorded by our director of Techniques, Michiko Ogawa. And it's an incredible recording. We use it demonstrated at shows, and it's 78 RPM. It's like listening to a 30 IPS tape, kind of that equivalent. And I'm sure you can, talk about some of the importance of why you're cutting records at 45 RPM as opposed to 33.
That's actually, you're picking up the next question.
Great.
So that's actually a good segue because I want to make sure we get the person's name in here. So Chris asked, is there any audio advantage to an album that's 45 RPM versus 33? Anybody want to answer it? Oh.
Well, I would definitely say there's definitely an advantage cutting at 45 versus 33, just because of the amount of information that you're placing into the groove over a certain amount of area. The ability to track that becomes better at the faster speed. And so, yes, there is an advantage at cutting 45 over 33. The only disadvantage is, like you said, Bill, having to get up and turn the record over more often than you ordinarily would.
Yep.
But no, there's definitely a technological advantage to the 45 RPM over the 33. But again, it comes down to how was it engineered? How well was it engineered? I don't think there's really, like with any format or any parameter within a format, it really comes down to how well is it being engineered and how well is it being played back. You could take the best record in the world, but if you play it back on a $50 Costco turntable, how good is it? How good is the experience?
I've got a huge collection of EP records that were used, back when when I did some DJ work. I still have some of the original ones from the 70s, but what's great about that is you get one song on one side of a record. They were often, extended cuts, but the groove depth is incredible. And the vinyl is very, very good. So I think part of it was that the engineers, folks like you could really dig in and deep and get the bass and, energy on these records is incredible. And, I love to pull them out, and it really shows off our turntables. They're quite exciting. I picked up an old Blondie record, I think, that was in my collection. It's just played it on the new model, and it's just brilliant. It's what can be cut into some of these grooves, at that higher speed. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think the one thing to note too, well, we may get into it. If your album has a lot of surface noise and you have a 45, you're going to pick it up a lot quicker. That's the one thing that I would note. But make sure you clean your albums well. That's an important note that we'll I'm sure we'll get to. But we'll take it a little bit more of a basic note. So Lewis, I think you can take this one. So how do you know when it's time to replace your cartridge?
Oh, well, as far as what we generally tend to live by here is that a stylus is good for up to about a maximum of 1,000 hours. Anything that is relative to say like records that are not in good condition or records that are not kept clean, things like this, or if the cartridge is not set up correctly, then this diminishes the lifespan of the stylus. But how do you know when it's time to replace your cartridge if you're not logging every hour that you're recording? Well, what you really want to do is, pay close attention to what's happening in the high frequencies. Generally, over time, when you have a worn stylus, that you will start to notice some sibilance, female voices, horns, things of that nature. Piano or violin sometimes gets a sizzly sound to it where it just no longer sounds clear. This is usually, a real tip-off that the stylus is starting to get past its usable life. Typically, ways to make sure that your stylus lasts as long as possible. Make sure to keep your records really clean. Make sure to clean the stylus after every record side. Make sure that you've spent the time to set up the cartridge correctly, so that it wears, congruently. And then you should be guaranteed, the longest life possible out of it. But yeah, there is a sound quality degradation. And I think that one thing that is kind of, almost sad in a way is that people sometimes tend to play a stylus to the point where it's very, very well worn, far beyond what they should. And then it's only when they finally replace it with a new one that they say, oh, wow, this sounds so much better. And meanwhile, they had been playing records with a suboptimal stylus. And come on, life is just, honestly, life is too short to be settling for, poor fidelity. We put so much into our systems, to our record collection, and to this ritual. It means so much to us that we should be enjoying it in the best way possible.
To add to that, Lewis, I'll say that there are many times where, in order to do our mastering process, we'll make sure to have an original pressing of a given title in the house, and I'll throw the pressing up on the lathe, and I'll look under it. I'll look at the grooves under the microscope, and you can clearly tell where the groove was cut and where the stylus that played it back was tracking. You could definitely see groove wear on records that were played back with either an improperly aligned stylus or too worn a stylus.
Yes.
So considering that so many records that we cherish, the mobile fidelity records for sure, are often irreplaceable, tracking them correctly and playing them back safely is paramount.
Yeah. And guys, if I may add, the hi-fi store I worked at when I was a kid, we actually had a microscope to check. We invited people to come in and bring their cartridges, and we checked the stylus under a microscope. I don't know too many places that do that anymore, but that was commonplace. We would have turntable clinics, and bring your turntable in, we'll check the balance, we'll clean it. And we had a microscope, and you could actually see dark areas where the stylus was worn. And we would either recommend a replacement or say, no, you got a couple hundred more hours, whatever. Most of the time people, back then it wasn't quite as expensive to, I don't know how much cartridges were in 1975, 1978. I don't think they were anywhere near as costly as they were now. But it definitely is a concern, and you should definitely think about, 1,000 hours goes by pretty quick if you're really enjoying your collection. So it's something to consider.
Yeah. And just a side note, another question that I've seen come up a couple times is, can a worn stylus damage records? And the answer to this is that yes. If a stylus becomes so worn that it develops flat spots, that these can actually harm the records. So, if you have, everybody has records that are a prized part of their collection. And so it pays to be cognizant about maintaining, some sort of life cycle of replacing the stylus, and also just keeping the stylus on the record clean. That is probably the best advice.
Yeah. So we talked about damage from albums, talk about older albums. So let's bring it up this way. So from Perry said, do old albums from the 70s, for example, regular press, repress today sound better or about the same as the original ones that are still in great shape?
So are we comparing original pressings and reissues? Is that the thrust of the question?
Well, I would say we could probably do it either way. Original pressings are, I think, a category of their own, usually a little bit more sought after. But if you just went to a normal record store and just picked up a random pressing, would it by standard be better than a repressed album today?
Well, I would say that we're going back to the 1970s. I mean, that's when the record business was booming, and it was about chopping out as many records as you possibly could because these things were selling in the millions. Mm-hmm. I mean, and so was each pressing being pressed as carefully as it possibly could be by the best pressing engineers on the staff, or were they giving it to the night guy who was going to work the graveyard shift and just get these things to market to make your numbers? I think that was so prevalent back in those days that it's kind of interesting to me that those pressings are so highly regarded, because very often it was just a piece of plastic that got pressed as quickly as possible. Today, and now that we're in particularly, and I'd like to say that in the 70s when mobile fidelity started, it was so easy to outshine the competition because nobody else was doing it like mobile fidelity was, to make small runs as carefully as possible. I mean, every single step, like today, every single step was considered and intentional and careful. But I would say today, considering that the volume of records is not what it was in the 70s, it's not in the millions anymore, at least in theory, but certainly at mobile fidelity in practice. These records are made much more carefully and in a much more time-consuming fashion. And by virtue of those aspects, I would expect a better record today than I certainly would in the 70s.
Yeah. I think that, again, there are exceptions to everything that we talk about today. There are going to be exceptions to the rule, and there's going to be a bunch of different opinions. But, you pull out like a Dynaflex record from the late 70s. You can't say that that's going to sound, better than a current new pressing.
Right.
So
exactly.
Again, there's a lot of exceptions, but you can also sometimes pull out a first pressing and it sounds fantastic. So, definitely look up to, every album will have some, numbers, letters on there that's going to identify exactly what the album is. Plug in a Discogs, see what, people say about it, and, check it out. Go to your local record store, have fun, sitting there for hours. They don't mind.
I think, it's an interesting hobby interest business where it's like people typically generally want, black and white answers, very easy explanations. And the fact of the matter is that there are so many variables in every aspect of this that there are no black and white answers. And you could have someone cut a pressing of Sgt. Pepper today, and it will be the best pressing of all time, especially if mobile fidelity did it. But you could also go back to the original pressing from 1967, cut by Harry Moss at EMI, and it sounds incredible. I mean, it's incredible because Jeff Emmerich was there. The Beatles were there. The creative fires were burning, and the master tape was brand new. I mean, there's all these other aspects that people don't. It's too much work to think about all of that for the average consumer. But it's valid, Yeah,
for sure. So we'll jump to another question that might not be so black and white. Bill, do you want to grab this one? So is a belt drive or direct drive a better turntable? I've heard so many opinions about this.
Yeah, everyone wants to know the answer, and it's certainly something that Techniques had addressed very early on in our design. And in fact, in 1970, if you think back to the day, what everyone was listening to were we listened to the radio and we listened to records, and we might be listening to tapes, but in 1970, our listening was really whatever was on the radio and our turntables. So the radio stations are spinning vinyl 24/7. And they needed two turntables so they didn't waste airtime, so they can skip from a commercial to a record to another track. And what happened was they're using belt-driven turntables, they're using idler drive turntables, rim drive turntables, all which require maintenance. When you're using them 24/7, they need maintenance, over time. And Techniques had designed direct drive motor for turntables in 1970, and they brought it into these studios. I can't show you a graphic easily, but it was just a drive system with a motor, and you plug it in and it drops into their consoles. Their tone arms were built into the consoles, and many stations never looked back. And Techniques became so popular because of that. And they wanted to make this product more popular and available to the masses. And in 1972, they came out with a complete turntable that was a turntable system, tone arm and everything. So direct drive solved a lot of ills for the industry, for broadcast. And the direct drive turntables never needed to be serviced. You don't have to replace a belt. I mean, back in the old models, a little bit of oil might have been something you might have had to do every 10 years or so, or something like that. But in the new ones, you don't have to do anything to it. It's just going to run. And it's also got much more torque and better braking. Those things don't matter so much for audiophile as much as DJs. And because of all this capability of the direct drive motor over the years, a development with the pro DJs became, it developed into a following, and, hip hop was born and turntablism was born. And most of it came because of the Technics 1200. And there's quite a story on our website. If you ever want to see our brand story, it tells a story of all the hi-fi products and all the the DJ products. And it's quite an amazing history of the 1200. So again, back to the original question, the belt drive turntables sound great. Techniques has made belt drive turntables over the years. We've made, and I still have one in the basement still working. It's great, but I do need to replace a belt from time to time, and I just love the ability to enjoy cleaning my records while the record's on there. I don't have to worry about wearing the belt down. I can take the record off while it's playing. I can stop, start, stop. I can do all these things that I wouldn't have to worry about dragging my belt down or wearing my parts down because I have to slow the motor, start and stop the motor to take the record off. Direct drive has a lot of advantages, and the sound quality now is just another thing that I can't say that you're going to hear a big difference immediately when you compare a belt drive turntable to a direct drive turntable, but there are subtleties. And the fact that we've introduced cordless direct drive into all the new turntables that we're making is really the difference in our product line. And I encourage you to give them a listen and hear what everyone's talking about. We have many award-winning models, especially the new SL1300G, which is more of an audiophile style turntable. Doesn't have the pitch fader, doesn't have the stroboscope, doesn't have the target light, but it's a very gorgeous turntable, and it has a lot of the strengths that come from the 1200G flagship model of ours. So I think that a belt drive turntable is great, but I think you owe it to yourself to just experience it and play a record and try and see what you like about it, because a lot of people are really appreciating direct drive, and we all have. I mean, if you're into this hobby, I mean, I have all kinds of turntables, not just direct drive. So, I have P mounts, I have you name it. I have other brands of turntables, so it's a hobby of mine. I'm sure Lewis feels the same way. He has one of the 1100s behind him, as he mentioned earlier to me, that was one of the iconic original direct drive models. So, that's I would answer that. But
when you think about it, it's kind of like what were these records cut on? It wasn't cut on a belt drive,
That's a good point. There's another good point.
So I definitely I've always appreciated the Techniques rec turntables and the direct drive models particularly. They're just, when especially if you're sensitive to pitch, I think the more sensitive to pitch a person is, the more they're going to appreciate the quartz locked direct drive turntables.
Yeah, these days we have a different design. Quartz lock was actually what we call our second generation of direct drive. We're now using a digital technology in the fourth generation of direct drive, and it's called Delta Sigma drive. That's what the new 1300 has. The new SL1200 GR2 has that. So we keep learning more, and our engineers keep finding ways to improve. It's hard to believe you can really improve on some of these models, but they've found ways to do that. And it really opens up, lets you hear what your cartridge can do. I think, we're really enjoying all the different sound on the different cartridges, a little more easily identifiable and things like that. Just some incredible sound.
Well, you see it. It's one of those things that there's a lot of different tables out there. One aspect of like the drive system doesn't make or break the table. I use the analogy of like Class D amplifiers all the time. Some people love Class D, some people hate Class D, but it depends on the amp. Just the same way it depends on the drive system on the turntable. But so you got time for a few more questions. We're coming up on the hour quick. So I've got one for Lewis here. Do modern cartridges cause wear on LPs?
No.
There we go.
Okay. So when we talk about modern cartridges, I think that there are a lot of different things to consider. You consider something like the stylus shape as being something that plays a part in here, because when you have a stylus shape that is a complex stylus shape, something like a line contact or a shibata, so on and so forth, that these have a larger degree of contact with the groove walls. And so the pressure, the tracking force, is distributed over a larger area. And so therefore, this actually minimizes wear. And so you kind of have to ask what stylus shape that there is, and also how much tracking force is being used. If we're talking about a DJ specific cartridge where it is designed to be rugged and it has to hold up to DJ use, then this is going to be something that creates more wear than your modern hi-fi type of stylus. For instance, if we're going to talk about this cartridge here today that we're giving away, the Concord Music Bronze, this is a cartridge that tracks at below 2 grams. It's a 1.8 grams tracking force, and it uses a nude fine line stylus. This is something that could really preserve your record collection and almost indefinitely. The laws of physics, don't allow us to say that there is no wear whatsoever. Of course, there is some degree of wear, but it is an imperceptible amount, and your record collection should last for your entire life and for the life of your next of kin.
Yep. So let's see. There was one question that I just had pop up here. Oh yeah, here we go. What's the most overlooked tweak or setup adjustment that I can make that can make a big sonic difference? What does that? Put a penny on the head shell? I'm just kidding. What do you guys recommend?
Good one.
I recommend spending extra time on cartridge setup. When you don't have something like a Concord or one-piece cartridge, spend the extra time. Get yourself a good quality alignment tool. Make some adjustments to vertical tracking angle. Listen very closely, because the more time that you spend on setup, it's a free lunch. You get better performance out of the cartridge.
Yep.
That's a good point. And I would say one thing about Technics turntables are the new series especially is that everything is tweakable. We talk about all kinds of things, after you get done setting it up, as Lewis pointed out, you can change head shells, you can change head shell wires, cartridge wires. You can upgrade those. You can buy silver wire, Ortophone makes those type of things. You can replace the RCA cable. You can replace the ground, the AC cord. You can replace the platter mats. You can replace the footers. So there's all kinds of tweaks that you can soup up your turntable. They're incredible stock, but people have all kinds of enjoyment from trying all these different things, trying different cartridges, having different cartridges for certain sounds that they like. And, record cleaners, anti-static cleaners, are a great addition. Probably a record cleaner might make the biggest improvement to some record collections, but it's it's all rather time consuming, but it is part of the appreciation and the enjoyment of the whole thing. So.
Yep. Yeah, I think that if I had to have a number one recommendation, it's pay attention to whatever surface your turntable's on, just as a whole, because you can get a lot of vibration that's going through there, and it can make it sound pretty bad. We were talking about this beforehand. In my theater, my sub shakes every piece of furniture and everything, especially at the volume I listen. But pay attention to that. There are wall mounts out there if you can't stop it. So some wall mounts can do a good job, but there's some isolation platters, and we're going to put out a piece of content here soon for Record Store Day. It's going to have a lot of these accessories and things in there. So go check that out. And if you have a problem with your system right now, ask one of our teams, or ask your local record store or whoever. But our local team or our online team should be able to help you out if you're not near us. But let's see, we've only got time for a few more. So here's a quick one that I'm going to answer. So what's a Record Store Day release that is a must get to play on my new turntable? Check out their website. Even if you don't see like an artist that you necessarily want, go and just check out some new stuff. I highly recommend a lot of the releases on there. There's a bunch of cool compilation albums that come out during Record Store Day time. I got one of my favorite albums there by a company or a pressing company called the Jazz Dispensary, which is a really cool one. So they do a lot of really cool jazz albums and compilation albums. So go check that out. Let's see. So we got time for one more. All right. Yeah, Bill, you want to tackle this one? Should you spend about the same amount on an external phono stage as you should on your cartridge? I guess Bill and
yeah, it's
and
kind of Lewis and I, but it's interesting. There's probably as many phono preamps as there are phono cartridges. So it can be challenging to pick the right one, and audition and hear the differences, and it can get very expensive. And so it depends also on your system, whether you have an integrated amp, or if you have a preamp that you don't have a phono stage and you need to insert a phono stage. There's all that's for anyone that doesn't really understand exactly what we're talking about. Most amplifiers, receivers, integrated amps, they have a phono section, but someone that has a preamp, they want to get the very best results, they can buy a phono preamplifier that would interpret the cartridge characteristics and give it the best presentation to your system. But so all these things make a difference, and there's some very affordable phono preamps, but there's also some very expensive preamps. I've tried a lot of different ones, and they have their own characteristics. Again, it's kind of like a cartridge. Some of them require a bit of, some of them have dip switches, and you have to make a lot of adjustments and things like that. So it just depends on what you're willing to, what you want to get out of the whole thing. And there's certain things that you can buy these days in certain phono preamps that can, remove crosstalk. Some have digital functions built in. Some have click and pop removers. There's all kinds of things that you can do with that. But I'd say I don't know if there's an equation. Maybe Lewis has a better example, but to say how much you should spend on either. But if you've got a $2,000 phono cartridge, I'd say you maybe half of that can go toward a phono preamp. But like I say, not everyone needs a phono preamp because they have one, and you want to kind of test that and see just how good that is before you start spending too much money on all these things. Technics does some interesting things in our integrated amplifiers that actually have digital capabilities on the phono preamps, and you can do a lot of interesting things like adjust RIA. You can adjust the EQ curves. You can remove crosstalk. You can equalize the cartridge so that it has a perfect understanding how to adapt that cartridge for the phono preamp. So there's a lot of things that you can look for. What I just mentioned are kind of unique, but if Lewis has anything to add to that, or Rob, I mean,
yeah, sure.
I don't know if there's a perfect equation of how much to spend on.
Yeah. There's never going to be a hard and fast rule over this, because a lot of this is relative to what cartridge that you're using. I mean, for people that are using moving coil cartridges that have a very low output, that the phono stage, the phono preamp becomes critically important. And in that case, I would say, yeah, definitely, go for the gold for a phono preamp if you're going to run a moving coil cartridge. If you're going to run a high output cartridge like a moving magnet, then, again, the preamp quality is something that cannot be overstated. This is really important stuff. But the requirements are not as stringent when you have a high output cartridge because there's a less need for amplification. And so you can get away with something perhaps a little bit less expensive. But, we have to talk about this in kind of an abstract way because there are so many different scenarios that apply depending on what your system is like and what your cartridge is like. So, but in general, like I said, the Phono preamp, super critically important piece of equipment. And, if you get a really good one, that you will be able to hear the difference, definitely.
Yeah. And there's things like step-up transformers too, right?
Yeah.
That's another part of the story, depending on what you're using. So
yeah, we could probably do a whole live stream right around those pieces. But awesome, guys. Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We're approaching 6 o'clock here, so let's get to some winners. So for best question, and again, you guys don't hate me. I let somebody on the other side pick the best question, and that's of the One Step Van Halen album. Almost said Zeppelin. So for that question is going to be Angus Small for what is the most overlooked tweak or setup adjustment that can make a big sonic difference.
That was a good question.
Good.
Yeah, our team liked that one. So that's for the Van Halen album. So for our big giveaway prize of the SL1200 and the Ortofon cartridge is Chris Roebuck, ChrisRoebuck. So reach out to our team. We'll get you set up and get you connected with a new turntable. So awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining the live stream, watching. Thank you guys for putting on a good conversation. This has been a lot of fun. So we don't have another giveaway announced yet, but we are going to have, like I said, a record store day put up, our post put up here soon with a lot of really valuable information. So check that out. But until next time, we'll see you later. Yep. Thanks, guys.
Congratulations.
All right.
To the winners.
Thank you.
See you guys.